Are you, Alice, menstruating right now?
What has that got to do with it?
Back off, man. I'm a scientist.
You're listening to 91 Reasons, a journey into the twisted landscape of pop culture. Keep your hands and arms inside the podcast at all times. And now, the voice, Jeff Tucker.
So I watched all of Picard, and I have to tell you, I was really looking forward to this show. I got a weird relationship with Next Generation, with Star Trek in general. Growing up, I was a devout Star Wars guy. I lived and breathed Star Wars. Star Trek was in syndication at that point, the original series. It was on TV, I think, every night, Channel 13, 11 o'clock. And I tuned in a couple of times, didn't get it. Wasn't enough gee whiz space stuff for me. It was a lot of weird, cheap-looking effects and Shatner's stilted version of acting, Captain. I didn't get it. And my next exposure to Star Trek was, I remember my brother had a VCR in his room. This is 1984, 85, maybe 84. And I remember one day being completely bored, having nothing to do, and there was a copy of Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. And so I put that in, and I watched Search for Spock. And if you've ever seen it, they don't find, Spock doesn't reunite with them till the end, and he's not really Spock. He doesn't have any of his thoughts because they're in McCoy, so they have to go to Vulcan and climb the steps of Mount Saleo and do the secret of Faltropan and swap brains. And then they sort of they talk for a few seconds, and then the movie ends, and I was like, this is a weird movie. It's pretty, it's an exciting, well-done film, but there's not a lot of resolution here. It just sort of ends. So that caused me to rethink a little bit about Star Trek. And of course, I watched Wrath of Khan. I watched motion picture and I was bored to tears. If you if you have trouble falling asleep, just put on motion picture and you'll go right to sleep. But Wrath of Khan is a masterpiece. Nicholas Meyer's take on Star Trek totally turned things on its ear and made it really exciting. And there's not a lot of action in Star Trek. They don't have but 2 or 3 small space skirmishes between the Reliant and the Enterprise. And it's mostly about the relationships between Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Sulu, Chekhov, Uhura, and the way they interact with each other. And, Kirk's got a son that he didn't know about, and the Genesis Project, and there's a whole 2, 3, and 4 have an overreaching multi-film storyline that all sort of links up. Then I revisited 3 and enjoyed it more because I knew what the hell was going on. And one of my favorite sequences is when they steal the Enterprise out of the space station. I just think that's a great sequence. I love the tension of whether the doors are going to open, the majesty of the Enterprise slowly moving out of you see the guy cleaning up at the restaurant watching the Enterprise go by. What was the answer? The answer is no. We are therefore going anyways. I really became a fan of Star Trek 3. Then, of course, Star Trek 4 comes out, and Star Trek 4 is totally different from any of the Star Trek films. It takes place on Earth. It's a time travel movie. They have to save whales. It has a conservation message. It's got a lot of comedy. Each of the characters has these moments that they stand out in. And Star Trek 4 really set the stage. Okay, I get this now. And by that time, I started watching Star Trek in syndication. I was in Seattle visiting Mr. Benton, and Star Trek was on every night, and I just, with nothing else to do, watched a lot of Star Trek and got into it and enjoyed it and realized that it could coexist next to Star Wars. They're not in competition. They're two different types of stories. Star Wars is this big epic saga of the Skywalker family, and you can destroy a planet, and the princess and all that. And Star Trek is more about the possibilities of mankind leaving Earth, finding new life. What is that new life? Do we get along with that new life? And a lot of philosophical quandaries. And I enjoyed that quite a bit. And they're all self-contained. And so when Star Trek IV came out on video cassette, it was a sell-through title. I think it was $30, and somebody in our group bought it. By this time, we're now in early to mid-1987. This guy, Greg, that I hung out with, was a major Star Trek fan. Huge Star Trek fan. Had a uniform, had a replica of of Kirk's command chair from the Enterprise. Star Trek everywhere, Star Trek this, Star Trek that. And he sort of fueled like, yeah, Star Trek, yes, Star Wars is dead, so let's move on to the next thing. So the cassette for Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, had a trailer on it for Star Trek The Next Generation. And it was all clips from Encounter at Farpoint. And here's a Star Trek that I could watch from the beginning and claim it as my own. I was truly the next generation of the next generation, if that makes sense. So we had a big party at Greg's apartment. Popcorn, candy, soda. Everybody came over. There was like 6 or 7, 8 of us. And we all watched Encounter at Farpoint. And like, okay, it's a 2-hour Star Trek movie on TV. And it's totally different. And the guy looks like Captain Stubing. And there's a robot-looking guy. And then a guy with a banana clip on his face. And who knows? And we really enjoyed it. And after that, I sporadically caught up with Next Generation here and there. I didn't watch it religiously. When you're 16, from about 16 to 23 or 24, I didn't watch a lot of TV. I was gone. I was doing plays, improv shows, performing here and there, trying to get a girl, getting a girl, marrying that girl. There was a lot going on, and TV just didn't factor into it. Like, I've never seen Friends. I've never seen Seinfeld. There are huge TV shows that have come and gone that I've never seen. I'd never watched them. And Star Trek, even though I watched a few, there were a lot that I missed. So, if you know me at all, you know I collect things. I love collect. That's what I've done. Star Wars made me a collector. So when Playmates started making their Star Trek figures, there was nothing else to buy in the store. So I bought a lot of Star Trek figures. And there was a moment in time, probably 1997. Yeah, 1997. I think I had about 400 carded Star Trek The Next Generation figures. I had multiples of some. I had boxes of open figures. I had all the ships. I had the play sets. By the time Generations came out, I had the engineering play set, the bridge, the shuttlecraft, the various collector ships, the micro inner space figures, the talking figures, the action figures that could Picard could talk, and then there was a Picard that could duel a sword with Q. I bought all of this stuff. They had a line of figures that kind of looked like Mego figures. I had all of those. And here's the funny part is, I didn't really watch the show. I would buy these characters. I knew these characters. Picard, Riker, Data, Worf, Troy, Dr. Crusher, Dr. Pulaski, Hugh Borg, Chief Miles O'Brien, Keiko, Wesley Crusher. I mean, you name it. I knew all these characters. And I bought all these figures, every variation, every outfit. There were some of the exclusives that I missed. There's one that I really would love to get now. JCPenney did an exclusive Data from the episode Redemption, where Worf gets back his family's honor, so Data takes command of a smaller ship, and so they made a Data not in the gold of the engineering, but in the red of command, even though in the episode, he doesn't even wear red of command, right? So it's a figure that doesn't have any place in the show, but gosh, it's like $300, and I can't handle it. So I bought all these figures, stacks and stacks. I remember going to some guy's house, and he had them for $2 each, and he had boxes and boxes, and I bought all of them. And then over the years, of course, you thin your collection out. I ended up opening the majority of those figures. I gave stacks of them to Austin, who played with them religiously. I have them right now. I'm looking at them right now. There's there's one of those kid 3-drawer chests that are just crammed with all these figures. I keep saying I'm going to go through them. But as my life moved on, my appreciation of Star Trek grew. I really enjoyed the show. The ones that I saw, I watched a lot of Voyager, never watched Deep Space Nine, never watched Enterprise. Loved Star Trek The Experience in Vegas. I've done a whole show on that. I think that's the finest theme park attraction not in a theme park ever created. It still holds up to this day. I have not been on Rise of the Resistance, but I think it would have to be stellar. And it looks pretty good because you get that full ride, because the Star Trek one was just a simulator, so there's a difference there. But Star Trek First Contact, Star Trek Generations, Insurrection, Nemesis. I saw all those movies in the theater, bought all the toys. When J.J. Abrams' reboot came out, I watched that. Austin got all the toys from Burger King, all the figures. They did a thing where if you bought all the figures, each of them came with a single piece of the bridge, so you could put the whole bridge together. But some of the figures were canceled, so the bridge was never complete, which is a bummer. Try explaining that to a 9-year-old. So I grew with Star Trek. One time I snuck onto Paramount Studios, onto the set of Next Generation. I sat in the captain's chair. I mean, that's a surreal moment. I remember leaving that set and watching them come back to shoot. So I saw Patrick Stewart, Michael Dorn, Brent Spiner dressed as the characters going to the set. Like, that's like forged in my mind, moments like that. So I have had these moments of really enjoying Star Trek, even though I never sat down and watched all of Next Generation. Who has time for that? So one time I was at a convention, had a table, we were selling something, I don't remember, this is years ago, and they put Walter Koenig next to us. He played Chekhov, and I remember we talked with him all day. And he was the nicest guy in the world. Still is, I'm sure. So I've had my weird moments with Star Trek. One time I watched Will Wheaton, a guy at a con at a table was selling stuff and asked for a picture, and Will Wheaton wanted to trade. So the guy had to give him an item to get a picture, and I thought it was a real turnoff for Will Wheaton. I'll admit it, I've had trouble liking Will Wheaton ever since that day, and that was like 88 or 89. That was a long time ago. I'm sure he's a nice enough fellow now, but those first impressions really do last. They really do. So what happened? I'll tell you what happened. The shutdown happened. The quarantine happened. And even before that, I started watching Next Generation from the beginning on Netflix. I'm in the middle of season 5. That's a lot of episodes. I have watched every minute of every one of those episodes, and I'm a season and a half from finishing. I'm shocked at how good they are. Somebody at Paramount took care of these episodes. They've been restored. They have new effects, but they're not jarring. They don't take you out of the show. Star Trek The Next Generation on Netflix looks better than it ever has. These are 1-hour movies as opposed to TV shows. They're really well done. They're thought-provoking. They ask moral questions. Usually, if there's action, it's very brief, and it's to further the story along. They rarely have action just for action's sake. They do their big episodes like Best of Both Worlds 1 and 2, where Picard gets assimilated by the Borg as Locutus, and all of the Federation has to fight him. There are scenes like that. But most of it is done through diplomacy. You really get to know Captain Picard as a character. He is thoughtful. He is benevolent. He is always looking for the good in people, never wants to do the right thing, only breaks the Prime Directive when it means if he didn't, people would die, and he can't have that on his conscience. Riker's the strong man of the crew, willing to take risks. Geordi is the brilliant science officer, engineering officer, who is ready to fix whatever needs to be fixed. He has some really standout episodes. I know that over the years, Data has become the most popular character. That's interesting. He's the one that they have to explain stuff to, so that he becomes sort of the proxy for the audience. Because if we don't know what's going on, either Data will explain it, or somebody will explain it to Data if it's not in his data banks. Pardon the pun. So, like Spock, he becomes the standout character. And they made a lot of figures of Data. But I'll tell you, watching the show again, and I say again, meaning some of the episodes are repeats for me, but the majority of them are first time. The standout character is Worf. Michael Dorn's character, Worf. I am in awe of what this guy is able to do. He's wearing a big prosthetic on his head. He's got a lot of makeup on, and yet his acting comes through stellar. Man, Worf has some of the best scenes of the entire series. There's a throwaway episode where an emissary is brought on board with a bodyguard of this old lady, and it turns out they're shapeshifters, and the old lady can morph into this giant creature that can murder everybody. It's a really silly episode. But at the end, Worf has this moment with this older lady and says, "I wish I could have fought alongside you." And I'm paraphrasing, but man, I got chills because I believed it. Like, I was so invested in his character, and that's one of the standout moments of this series for me. It always will be. I'm going to watch that episode again because I just really enjoyed that moment. Worf has this backstory of his father was disgraced by the Klingon Empire. He took the blame for something he didn't do, and the shame and the dishonor follows through into the son, into the children of that family. So Worf has to live outside the Klingon Empire, even though he wants to be a part of it. It's a really, really interesting storyline, and the stuff they do with the Klingons on zero budget is really quite amazing. I know some of the effects, like I said, have been augmented, but a lot of the stuff is just characters on sets, and they stand there and they talk. But the weight of the words really drives the point home more than giant space battles. And that's the main difference between Star Trek, the TV series. I'm talking about Next Generation, not Discovery, which I think is all... I've not seen it, but I did watch it, like 10 minutes of it, and it was a lot of space battles. They somehow think that Star Trek is about spaceships and space battles. And yes, the Enterprise is a part of it, but in the same way that the Love Boat is a character on the Love Boat. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't have a lot of episodes where the ship is sinking and Captain Stubing has to protect it, or the ship's power goes out and Doc and Gopher have to go. It's not like that. It's about what characters are interacting this week. And when they couldn't afford guest stars, they would come up with a story that involves just the characters on the ship, and those are some of the best. Some of the best. And the difference between that and the movies is all about models getting blown up. You know, in Generations, they couldn't wait to blow up the Enterprise D, and not just blow it up, but like the body section gets disintegrated, and then the saucer section crashes, and all the quote-unquote windows break. If you've watched the Red Letter Media Mr. Plinkett review, you know what I'm talking about. And it's the same thing that happened in Star Trek, The Search for Spock. They couldn't wait to blow up the model of the Enterprise. Because it's just something you're not allowed to do. The Enterprise never gets blown up. So the moments they do, they relish it and they play it up. And then the Enterprise E comes out. The Enterprise B, C, I've seen them all. The D. But the differences are that the movies are good, but they get it wrong. Because they're more interested in gee-whiz Star Wars effects than they are in Star Trek character moments. It's those moments that make the show. Let's not forget the finale of Star Trek The Next Generation, the TV show, All Good Things, ends with the characters playing cards. And Picard says, I should have done this a long time ago. It's a human moment. It's a human moment of friendship and camaraderie, and we're on this ship and we're doing this thing together, and we're the family that we've got. And, there are moments where they've done in Star Trek, like Sulu has a daughter, and Picard has a family in the episode Inner Light, which is a stellar piece of storytelling. And the regret that the characters have is that they never had time for a family. They gave Worf a son. Crusher has Wesley. But Picard never settles down, never has a family. And he's a company man. The company is Starfleet. So I'm bittersweet when I watch Picard, because the lead up to Picard, I was already watching the episodes sporadically. Before the shutdown, when I was only able to watch one at a time here and there. Now I watch usually 1.5, if that makes sense. But I was excited to see Picard. They strung it out week to week, like The Mandalorian, to get you to buy their service. And I've always trusted Patrick Stewart. I think he's a phenomenal actor. Oh my God, is he a good actor? Even in Schlock, you ever seen Conspiracy Theory with Mel Gibson? Patrick Stewart's the bad guy. That movie's terrible, but he's good in it. There's a movie, Masterminds, where he's being thwarted by a young kid, and he's playing this, I think he's got a mustache in it. He's twirling his snidely whiplash mustache. And of course, Professor X. And then there was a movie called The Green Room where he played like a white supremacist or something. I don't remember. I know that was about a punk band or something. But I heard it was really good. And it's great to see him stretch out and do these other parts. But Picard, for my generation, the next generation, is what he'll be remembered for. Younger people will know him only as Professor X. I know him as Captain Picard because I had 40 different Captain Picard figures from Playmates and the Galoob line. And even talk about the Galoob line, which I'm collecting now because I'm a big dork. But watching the Picard show, I'll be honest with you, I didn't get it, man. I just didn't get it. And it's not that I'm old and that I want things to be the way they are. I love seeing the progression age-wise of characters. I love seeing characters grow and change in ways you don't expect. But the catalyst for Picard's story in the show Picard, it makes no sense. Having watched these episodes of Next Generation, they're so fresh in my mind. Romulus, where the Romulans live, the Romulans are the heavy of the series. Anytime the Romulans show up, stuff is about to go down. Their ships are gigantic. The Enterprise is big. The Enterprise D is massive. But the Romulan ships dwarf it. And when they show up, there's usually 3 to 4 of them. They materialize, they decloak, and Riker yells, red alert, shields up, every time. So the idea that their planet would be decaying, and they need to get their people off-world, but they need the Federation's help, that premise alone makes no sense. The Romulans were, in the context of Star Trek, far ahead of the Federation in technology. Their ships were bigger, faster, better, on every aspect. So the idea that Picard has to be this this savior of the Romulan people and help get them off-world using a newly created fleet of ships from Starfleet? Did anybody who wrote this show actually watch The Next Generation? And not all of them. You could have spot-checked a few. You could have sat down with some Uber fans and said, look, if I wanted to know this about Star Trek, what episode would I watch? These guys could tell you. But they didn't. What did Ian Malcolm say? You stood on the shoulders of geniuses, you used research, and you were so caught up in whether you could, you didn't think to ask whether you should. I always go back to that. Why does this exist? It exists to sell the Paramount CBS app. So you can give them $7 a month to watch this crud, right? But they didn't get any of it right. Because you're dropped into a world that doesn't mesh up with what you've seen before. They didn't have like a primer on the decay of Romulan society. And you can always go to Star Trek for an example. In Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, Praxis explodes, and the Klingon Empire suddenly is given a time limit. They've only got so many years left before they're out of energy, and the Federation has to step in, get peace with them, and enfold them into the Federation of Planets. That's the plot of that show. But they preface that by saying that the Klingons have lost their energy source, and that's why this is happening. And the Klingons were always rough and tumble. Their ships are always dirty. They don't work properly. They're made for function only, zero form. They're military in essence, warriors. Where the Romulans are like flying around in an Apple store. So the idea that the Romulans wouldn't be able to simply get people off-world over a matter of years, that they would have to beg the Federation for help, that's ridiculous. That's just rewriting history to fit your narrative. And you lose me at that. So then you have this android. They don't ever say the word robot on Star Trek. You have an android uprising on Mars where they're building the ships, where the androids turn on everybody and kill everybody. So the fleet doesn't get built. Now, Starfleet already has a gazillion ships. They're not hurting for ships, but they need to build special ships to hold people? This is so dumb. This is so Alex Kurtzman, where they just dive in, and Akiva Goldsman, Akiva Goldsman's got an Oscar, for God's sake. Alex Kurtzman wrote, the Transformer movies, where logic goes out the window. Nobody behaves like a human. Nobody behaves normal. They make weird decisions based on what the plot needs them to do. When I'm writing my story, my book series, and I try to get the characters to do or say something that's not in character, it doesn't look right on the page. The characters in my head fight me and say, we don't do that. But these guys don't have that problem. They're given a deadline. They got to get this thing filmed. They got to get going. Patrick Stewart's not getting any younger. So that's our story, that the androids rose up, and so androids were outlawed throughout the galaxy. And for some reason, of all the Star Trek to reference, they reference Nemesis, which is a mess. Early CGI effects. Blah story about Picard having a clone played by Tom Hardy, of all people. And it ends with Data sacrificing himself for the greater good. And for some reason, Picard now is haunted by Data's sacrifice and has reoccurring dreams about him. And if you watch the series, I'm currently watching it, Picard respects Data as an officer. But 9 times out of 10, he's completely irritated by the guy's behavior because he doesn't have time to stop and explain things or to listen to Data over-explain things. Does that make sense? So this idea that Data's death would haunt him for 30 years? No. Picard would have realized Data was an android. He used his programming and his everything he had learned about humanity to sacrifice himself to save the Enterprise, and he would have died a hero's death. It would not have been anything for martyrdom or to dwell on, because Data wouldn't have wanted it. So our story is about, the actor saying it on the show, it's stupid. Me trying to regurgitate it is even dumber. That somehow a single microchip from Data was salvaged, and from that single microchip, they were able to create two women, twin daughters of Data. So this character that we meet, Vosh, whatever her name, no, Vosh is from Next Generation. Dosh, she's Data's daughter in every way, shape, or form, only like Rachel in Blade Runner, she doesn't know she's a replicant android. So these special ops guys try to murder her. They kill her boyfriend, and she calls her mom, and she gets a voice that tells her to go visit Picard. And we find Picard on a winery in France, similar to the one we saw on Shore Leave, which somebody once told me was a terrible episode. And I'll tell you what, I started crying at the end of Shore Leave. It was so good, because it's just about characters. It's about Picard facing his brother. Oh, God, it was so good. So, Dosh goes to visit Picard, who's been told that he has a brain cloud. You know, that's the disease in Joe versus the volcano. And he only has 10 minutes or more to live. We don't know. Could happen now. Could happen here. He's got movie disease. And movie disease says you only die when the script says they need you to die. And there's a really silly sequence where Picard is giving an interview on a news program that's being broadcast throughout the galaxy, and she has a gotcha moment about saving the Romulans. And again, does anybody watch Star Trek? They don't watch television. In one of the episodes, Data has to describe to somebody what it even is. It's not part of the story. The characters are never shown sitting and watching filmed anything. They take live video calls. They go on the holodeck. They watch live productions of plays. They participate in all that, but they don't watch TV. TV's deemed superfluous and a waste of time. So the whole show hinges on Picard having this moment on television and Dosh rushing to him. And then for some reason they go to Starfleet, which is the Anaheim Convention Center. And Picard goes there to like look at his records or his like hope chest. And then Dosh shows up, and these guys that are trying to kill her show up. They disintegrate her, and then they blow themselves up. And Picard gets thrown across the roof, and when he wakes up, I'm not kidding, he's in France. He wakes up back home in France. It's so dumb. So dumb. Now he finds out Dosh has a sister who's on a salvaged Borg cube, and they're freeing the former Borg back to sentient, free-thinking beings. They dig up Hugh Borg to run the project. He's a great character from Next Generation. Picard meets up with this doctor named Agnes, who's going to explain how androids are made, because she was in love and having an affair with the guy who built Dosh out of Data's single microchip. Are you lost already? The main issue I have with this whole Picard series is that how many episodes are there? 9, 10? Let's just say there's 10. It's a 10-hour movie. It's not even a series. It's a 10-hour movie chopped up into 1-hour segments. They're not self-contained. They don't each tell their own story and then add to the mythos of this Dosh character and why they're trying to kill her. Why are the Romulans trying to kill her? Why are the Romulans high up in Starfleet? This is written by people who don't like Star Trek. That's the sad part, is they don't like it. Because it's vulgar. They use the F word in it a few times. Starfleet, the world of Star Trek is Gene Roddenberry's dream of a perfect utopia where everybody gets along, you don't need money, food is taken care of through replicators, and humans are supposed to work together to find a better world, to find new people and make them friends, and information, curiosity, exploration. It's not about this murder show where everybody in Picard murders people. They get obliterated, they blow up. At one point, all of the people that are saved from the Borg cube get jettisoned into space. It was really disgusting. They dig up Seven of Nine, and she has some relationship with Picard. They never met in the show. They don't talk about some history. Picard has this woman, Raffi, who's his number one, and she calls him JL. And I don't know where that, I know it's for Jean-Luc. I'm not stupid, but that's the captain. You don't ever see Riker go, "Hey, Picard." He goes, "Captain," or "Captain Picard," or "Sir." He would never go JL. Picard earned his rank to be the captain of the Enterprise. And it shouldn't be, it's just too cozy for me. I don't get it. I just don't get it. If it's because she doesn't like him, that's fine. Like if it was in the present day when he's trying to recruit her, and she's like, you can leave anytime you want, JL. And he goes, "Oh my God." But they do a flashback where she's calling him JL in uniform. Dumb. Just dumb. They waltz Picard through these stupid... He's way too old for these adventures. He has these falls that would kill even a healthy man. But he gets up. He dresses up in a stupid costume and does a stupid accent with an eye patch. I guess it's supposed to come off like irreverent, but it just comes across as silly. It's just silly. You know the scene in Last Crusade where Indiana Jones and Elsa go up to the castle, and he puts on Elsa's jacket and hat, and he goes, "We are here to see the tapestries." The guy goes, "Tapestries?" He goes, "Yes, it's Mr. McDonald to see the tapestries." And you're like, oh, it's a silly ploy to get in, but it ends in 5 seconds, and even Indiana Jones looks embarrassed that he's doing it. This isn't like that at all. This is played long and drawn out. And it culminates in Seven of Nine disintegrating people. Okay. The Agnes doctor, they finally find the doctor they're looking for who built Dosh and her sister. And he's supposed to take them to the planet of the androids. And instead, Agnes murders him. She looks into his eyes and kills him while he's laying on a gurney. For me, it was an interesting moment because I wanted to see what the outcome would be of that. Because at some point, she has to pay for that crime. She has committed murder. And I'll tell you what, by the end, her and the captain, who have already had sex, sort of go off to bone again and laugh about it. The guy's dead, honey. This character is not redeemable. I was waiting for her to sacrifice herself for the greater good, and it doesn't happen. She's able to, think about that. You have a main character who murders another character, and the character she murders is not a villain. That guy's not a bad guy in any way. He's on their side. And she holds his hand and watches him die on the table. What? Who writes this crap? Are you kidding me? So we eventually find out, I haven't even talked about, there's so much mess to this show. There's a Romulan Vulcan hybrid guy and his sister that are trying to get Dosh to tell him where the magic android homeworld is. And it's some of the laziest writing you've ever seen. Every time they meet, he goes, "Oh, hello again, dear sister. Oh, dear brother." It's almost it's almost the dialogue I write for Lucy and Linus. Dear brother, oh, dear sister. But you do that because little kids do that. That's how little kids talk. That's not how adults talk. Like, it's weird. And they come off a little incestuous. Not Lucy and Linus, but the two Vulcan Romulan people. It's a little incestuous, like they're kind of hot for each other. It's like, again, who wrote this crap? Who approved this? And then these actors went and did it? This is ridiculous. But the plot of the show is simply this. A bunch of Romulan witches get together, and they have a vision of all of the universe dying because of artificial intelligence gaining a soul, basically. So they have to now go around the galaxy killing all androids so that whatever the unspeakable horror that's going to kill the galaxy, the prophecy won't come true. That's it. That's the whole plot. My friends, that's the plot of Tomorrowland, where George Clooney's character as a child finds out what day the world will end, and he is thrown out because they can't handle the vision of the Earth destroying itself, global warming, what are we going to do? So the Romulans are like, oh no, the android uprising. When they show this vision to people, the other Romulan witch sisters, some of them kill themselves. Like they stand around in a circle, and they hold hands, and they look at the magic whatever it is, and the vision comes, and oh, the vision. They actually show the vision, and it's stock footage. Like, you know how, you ever watch something where two people are going to have sex, and then they cut to a train going into a tunnel? That's what it was. It was like all of a sudden, it became, like they do on The Simpsons, the stock footage festival, the one where Grandpa invents the love potion. So, like, they go to the vision, and it's like a robot eyeball and a fox decomposing, and I was like, oh, that looks bad. They bought that off of Shutterstock. Like, this show's even cheaper than I thought it was. Holy moly. Like, they can't just tell each other what the prophecy is. Hey, look, the prophecy's bad. Why don't I tell you? If we don't destroy the androids, then something's going to come out of the sky and kill us all. Oh, that's rough. We better destroy the androids then. No. I need to show it to you. You know how when the milk is bad, you don't just pour it down the drain. You're like, look, you got to smell this. It's bad. Oh, my God, this is terrible. You're right. No, I'll take your word for it. I'll take your word for it that it's bad. Again, this is such juvenile, silly. These are plots that you'd see like on the Super Friends. That's how inane and cheesy they are. They're Super Friend plots. And I love the Super Friends, but they have their place. And this is not Star Trek, man. It's not Star Trek at all. So they eventually trick Dosh into telling him where the android mega world is or something, and they all got to get there, and everybody has these stupid moments, like Raffi has to stop and see her son who doesn't want to talk to her, but there's no resolution to it. It's just this pointless filler side plot, and you feel used. Like, oh, you got me to invest in this, but there's no payoff. She doesn't call her son at the end and go, look, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. Mankind almost just was, every life form in the universe was almost destroyed, and we saved the day, and I just want to tell you I love you. No, nothing like that. Nothing at all. These side plots are pointless. So they finally get to the android world, and I'm not kidding. It looks like a mini mall. Like, if you ever been to the Lab out in Costa Mesa, it's this alternative. It's the mall-ternative. It's like the alternative mall with cool hip stuff. That's what it looks. Or the Container Park in Vegas. Like, just this weird mini mall. It doesn't look like if there were truly androids without human emotions, then they wouldn't need anything to be aesthetically pleasing. And they're not like Dosh. They know that they're androids because their skin is gold. So they know that they're not human. So why do they need all this stuff? Wouldn't they just be sitting in an empty room naked? Like, they don't need anything. Unless I missed some dialogue, I don't know. And then when they get there, of course they meet Dr. Noonien Soong's grandson or something, played by Brent Spiner. And it's great seeing Brent Spiner. He's a great actor. But what's he doing there? Why is he playing this part? How can you create an entire android out of a single chip? And then we find out that, like, he's got Data's life force in, like, a data bank. Like, you can go and, like, plug in and hang out with Data. Why wouldn't they just give him a body? If they have his full consciousness, isn't it cruel to keep him in, like, a fake living room for 40 years? I don't know. I don't know. But, of course, like any Alex Kurtzman piece of garbage, if this is like Revenge of the Fallen or Dark of the Moon or those Transformer garbage movies where inevitably it ends with somebody is building a machine that can open a portal in the sky. I'm not kidding. They use the portal in the sky again. At the same time, the Romulans are on their way and they're going to destroy everybody. And for some reason, the Romulans now have a gazillion ships. So in the last 30 years, they were forced to live on a Wild West planet with like a dirt bar, or they built an entire fleet of mega ships. It makes no sense. It's stupid. And Dosh is building the tower to signal that the robot androids have gained sentience. You know, they have a soul, so it's time to eliminate all the organic life forms. The Romulans show up. Picard begs Starfleet, this woman who's told him to shut the F up. Like, she told Jean-Luc Picard to shut the F up. I should have turned it off right there. Because it's obvious they have no respect for this character. And I know that characters have to be taken down a notch so that we can watch them rise up. But talking to Picard, it'd be like talking to Patton or Schwarzkopf or Colin Powell like that. Like, it's just not done. These guys have earned the respect. Picard goes up. There's some silliness involving giant space plants that can eat ships. I'm not kidding. Picard does the Picard maneuver where it appears as if your ship is in more than one spot to fool the Romulans into thinking there's a bunch of tiny ships to face, even though, like, the Romulan ships are massive. They can just destroy everything. The Romulans have to start a countdown. They can't just fire on the planet. They have to go, like, initiate planet purge countdown now. 1 minute. 55 seconds. Like, oh my God. It's like suddenly all these movies are about watching your food get done in a microwave. And you just sort of stand there like, okay, 30 seconds, 25 seconds. Wish my food was done. Really want those pizza rolls. 15 seconds, 10 seconds. Oh, they're too hot now. So at the last minute, Riker, and I didn't even talk about the stupid Riker, Troy filler. It's just filler. Something about they had a son that died, but the kid wouldn't have died if there'd been an android to save him. Like, what is all this for? Riker shows up in a giant fleet of Starfleet ships. There's a standoff that lasts a minute. And then all the Romulans turn and leave. Okay, the day has been saved. Dosh is convinced not to build the tower. The portal starts to open, and it's like Doc Ock tentacles are coming to get us. It's not really scary at all. Should have not shown anything at all. And Riker goes, well, the day is saved, goodbye, and they leave. The Romulans and the Federation face off for a minute. The Romulans leave, and then a minute later, the Federation leaves. It's like playing Risk, where somebody keeps tipping the board, and all the pieces slide one way, then they slide the other, but ultimately you don't care because there's no tension. There's no tension to it. Dosh realizes the value of human life, I guess. I don't know. Picard dies of a brain aneurysm. Picard dies of a brain aneurysm, and they put his body into an exact duplicate of his own. So he wakes up, and he's still 80, and he still has pains in his knees, and he's still gonna die in a few years. And it was the dumbest ending I've ever seen. You know what? Just let the guy die. If you're doing this to give Captain Picard a big send-off, then do that. And do a one and done season. But that's not what they do, of course. It's got to be as long as they can make it. And it was just dumb. The problem is that the show was just dumb. They were violent in so many ways to these characters. One guy gets his eye plucked out, and they show it multiple times. A guy gets beheaded, and we have to see it. All those bodies are thrown into space. Somebody gets their eye plucked out to use to open a door, I think, like in Blade Runner. The Romulan incestuous brother guy gets his face slashed, and then the next scene there's no slash. Like, it's even sloppy in its editing and storytelling. The Romulan sister has to have a hand-to-hand combat fight with 7 of 9, where she ends up getting thrown into a bottomless pit. Like, all of it's really violent in a way that Star Trek is not ever really that violent. It has moments of violence. Like, when Captain Kirk is kicking Krug in Star Trek 3, I have had enough of you, and he kicks him off. That's after he's already tried to save the guy. How many ways do I have to say this? Star Trek characters preserve life at all costs, no matter what. Death is the final and last option. What does McCoy say when the Enterprise is exploding? Kirk says, "What have I done?" McCoy says, "What you always do. You turn death into a fighting chance to live." You get chills watching stuff like that. All I got watching Picard was homesick for the Next Generation episodes, where I was like, well, I could just watch the good ones now. I don't have to watch this. I don't got to watch this crap at all. And that's a real shame, because the Picard series could have been 10 standalone Star Trek episodes with an overlying story through them. And it could have been something that would stand the test of time. But it's obvious that, again, the writers don't understand Star Trek. They don't want to understand Star Trek. They don't know what makes Star Trek a thing. They don't know why it's lasted so long and people have dressed up like it and named themselves. I knew a guy in the convention circuit. His name was James. His name was James, and his last name was Skirk. James Skirk. Why people have turned their entire houses into replicas of the Enterprise. Why people finance their own sequels and series and get the real actors involved. Because it always mattered. Because even after Roddenberry died, they said, look, we're going to keep going on this and we're going to make it something special. I've heard nothing but immaculate praise for Deep Space Nine. I can't wait to watch it when I finish Next Generation. The people who wrote this, they just want to write their own agenda. And that's fine. Make your own characters. Make it a new Star Trek show. And people can choose to watch it or not. But to take Picard and thrust him into this weird... Like, in the show, there's 2 different Romulan cults. Like, how many Romulan cults can there be? But there's 2 of them. And they don't understand it. They don't like it. And I can tell you the exact moment I realized this on screen. And that's how I'm going to end this episode. Picard has taken a liking to this young Romulan boy who is being raised by these ninja nuns to be a warrior. And he's a pretty interesting character. He's so much like Legolas from Lord of the Rings that it's almost plagiarism. But at some point, he has to leave and try to fix the fact that there's no more ships to rescue the Romulans before their planet explodes. So he has to leave, and he tells the kid, look, basically, I'm never going to see you again, but it was great being with you for these times, and I got to go. And Star Trek, because they didn't have a lot of money back in the day, for a shuttlecraft in every episode. They invented beaming. That was done as a cost-cutting measure. Beam me up, Scotty. Even though he never said it in the show, it's ubiquitous with pop culture. You know, Luke, I am your father. Beam me up, Scotty. Where we're going, we don't need roads, right? These are all hallmarks. The beaming is part of the Star Trek mythos. It's how they get from the ground to the ship. They beam up, they beam down. That being said, watch the sequence where Picard has to leave. He puts on this stupid hat, and he turns to go, and he's walking down the stairs when they beam him out. I don't know how anybody didn't see this during the writing, the production, the post-production special effects. Nobody at any time said, well, when he gets to where he's going to fall because he's going down steps. Are you beaming him to steps? And I know this is minutiae, my friends. I know this. This is the kind of guy I am. This is where the little things your brain goes, oh, that's stupid. Well, now I'm out of the show. Oh. Like in Rise of Skywalker, when they blow up Kylo Ren's ship, and then the next scene on the Death Star trench, he shows up in his ship. Oh, it's a different ship. No, it's the same ship because he's got the Jedi Wayfinder or the Sith Wayfinder in it, whatever it is. But you see these little things add up because they're asleep at the wheel. And they figure, look, it doesn't matter. But it's when you take the time to make projects that matter, that these details are important. And Picard walking down the steps while he's beaming is stupid. That means when they beam him somewhere, he's in mid-walk. So he's either going to fall, he's going to be in the floor because they beamed him while he's between two levels, or what? They go 2 to beam up, they hit their communicator, 2 to beam up, and the next shot is they're on the pad. They're on the pad. It's a play set. So if he's walking, he's going to fall. And that's, in a nutshell, why that Picard show irritated me so. They beamed him while he was walking downstairs. What a bummer. It could have been so good. And the idea that instead of dying, he's now got a new body. Oh, Picard, you deserve better. So I am now going to go watch Inner Light, which is one of the finest hours of science fiction storytelling ever created, and I can't wait to watch it. And when Picard says he wished he had kids, he did. In that episode, he did. But they don't care, because canon is out the window. And that's unfortunate. Oh well, my friends, live long and prosper. 91 Reasons.
Thanks for listening to 91 Reasons. Please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. Find us on Facebook. Is anyone even still listening?
I remember when this was all farmland as far as the eye could see. Old man Peabody owned all of this. He had this crazy idea about breeding pine trees.